Welcome everyone from all over the world to this third and last panel discussion. I want to say to give my greetings especially to Don Dioco from Macau, to Mark Conte, to Tatiana Poliakova, and to Mahua Bhatt from Kenya. It's wonderful to have you here in this discussion. I have the pleasure to chair this third and last panel discussion under the title of City Branding Research, New Trends on How to Deal with the New Reality Post-COVID-19. And in this roundtable panel, we will have the chance of meeting four prominent experts in the field of place branding that are at the same time well-known academics and experienced professionals, helping cities and regions gain a favorable and positive image and reputation. So in this first part of the discussion, all four speakers will make a brief initial statement or presentation about how city branding should cope with the crisis. We will have a second part, and then I will ask some questions to our guests. And then in the third and final part, we will be answering questions. We will be taking questions from the audience. So if you want to ask something, please feel free to enter whenever you feel your questions through the chat function, and please add your name and organization in order to be able to introduce you properly. So we will start with our first participant, Michalis Kavaratsis. Michalis is an associate professor of marketing at the University of Leicester, and he holds a PhD in urban marketing. He's one of the most cited authors in the field of place branding and has published a high number of articles and influential books, such as Rethinking Place Branding and Inclusive Place Branding. Professor Kavaratsis is a senior member of the Institute of Site Management and a founding member of the International Place Branding Association. So, Michalis, hello. Can you share with us your initial thoughts?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Jose, for this introduction. I don't know what all that means to the many practitioners we have in the audience today, but yeah, I'm here. I'm very happy to be here to share with you some of my thoughts on the current situation and the place branding. It's a pity we cannot be all together in Barcelona at the moment and see each other face to face, but I'm sure we'll get the chance in the near future. Thank you very much to all the organizers for the invitation to speak today. I want to keep this very brief. In this opening sort of statement, I'd like to share two main points that I see as trends at the moment in place branding. And actually, I'm happy about both of them. So I'll just tell you what these are. First of all, I think I see, the first point is that obviously none of us is a future teller here, and we cannot be certain of what the future holds, right? Let's be straightforward about that and openly admit it. That's why whatever I say, I will also say it with a question mark at the end, and with the intention to raise it as a further research question that we academics like so much. So that is my spirit today. The first point I want to mention, and I see around me and I welcome wholeheartedly, is this attempt that has been around for some time but has been emphasized with the crisis, an attempt to bring the place brand and bring place branding closer to people in a way. We just saw, the previous panel was really about that, about collaboration and everything. And I think this is a very welcome attempt to move away from an earlier, old-fashioned now process of, top-down definition and development of a brand to a much more open process that involves stakeholders and asks them what they want. That is for me very, very welcome. I think it's very good because it leads to a more sustainable city and place brand. But that's something we can talk about hopefully a bit more later on. It is very good that we take the place brand away from down from the consultants and academics and politicians, perhaps cloud, down to the streets, down to where people experience the brand and see the usefulness of the brand to their lives, you know. So that is the first point. The second point I want to mention that I see is a general trend to rethink the relationship between place branding and communication. I think during the whole webinar so far today, I was very happy to see a minimized, compared to the past, attention to promotion, really. We didn't really talk about promotion today, and I'm very happy about that. This relationship between branding and communication is really around this double question of how much of place branding is really communication, but also what kind of communication are we talking about? What is the nature of this communication, and what is the real essence of branding as communication? I'm happy to see that the crisis, as terrible as it is, has forced us perhaps to move away from the older version of branding as promotion and, you know, towards a much more a much wider understanding of communication, including listening and not only speaking. And I think that that is a very good point for me to stop talking and start listening. So I think these are the 2 points I will mention for the moment, and hopefully later we can discuss further.
Thank you very much, Michalis, for sharing your thoughts. And now it's the turn for Magdalena Florek. Magdalena is an associate professor at the University of Economics and Business in Poznan. She is the strategic consultant and co-author of numerous branding and promotion strategies for cities, towns, and regions in Poland. Professor Florek is a co-founder and board member of the Best Place, the European Place Marketing Institute, senior fellow of the Institute of Place Management, and co-founder and vice president of the International Place Branding Association. So Magdalena, can you tell us what do you think about how to deal with a new reality post-COVID? We cannot hear you, Magdalena, right now. No, there's no sound in here. No, we cannot hear you. Maybe we can hand over to Hong Fan, and while you solve these problems, Magdalena, you try to solve these problems, I will hand over to Hong. I will introduce her now. Hong Fan is a professor at the School of Journalism and Communication at Tsinghua University in Beijing, China. She is also director of the National Center for Image Research and head of City Branding Studio at the same university. Professor Fan is a leading scholar in national image research and brand consulting and a board member of the International Place Branding Association. So now, Professor Fan, can you share with us your initial statement?
Okay, thank you, Jose. Can you hear me right?
Yeah, perfectly well.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, your university and Barcelona City Council for inviting me to join you. I visited Barcelona a few years ago. I love the city. Gives me very, very beautiful memory. I hope Barcelona can attract tourists not very long after the virus. Give Barcelona my very best wishes. So my background is my undergraduate and my MA master degree is on language and communication. My PhD is more on cross-cultural communication. So my first point for today is culture plays a very big role in shaping human behaviors and also in shaping the style or the way in management, the way in communication, and also in the way of concerted efforts in dealing with the crisis. So that's my number one, cultural issues. Number two, I teach in my school, I teach global communication. I also teach strategic communication, and I teach in the business school corporate communication, including crisis management. So I think today's topic is a good compilation of my teaching stuff. So my second point for today is dealing with crisis needs strategic planning and strategic management of the city, and also strategic communication plan. Lastly, I think place branding is at a very difficult time now, since people tend to encourage to stay at home in most places. So my third point for today is branding for places must be different. We can focus on very unique features, unique attractiveness of the places by city spirit, by how people as heroes contribute to their places, and by community engagement. So Jose, that's what I want to share for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hong. Let's try again with Magdalena. Are you here? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay,
Well,
I had to borrow the headphones from my son. Sorry for that. Okay, so thank you very much. And again, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for invitation. No doubt this couple of months provided us with the time and opportunity to reflect. So let me share with you some reflections on the issues which, in my opinion, will be of paramount importance to city branding and the new reality. So firstly, I have an impression that as a result of the pandemic, cities should clarify and reinforce their role in the context of affecting public welfare, common good, and societies. In other words, it is a need for a stronger contribution to public value at the moment. At the time of the epidemic, cities have faced an opportunity to prove their contribution and creating value of importance to many groups. And the new social situation, the biggest value has probably been the way in which cities and their inhabitants responded to the latest needs, how they cooperated and supported each other, how bottom-up initiatives were launched in the face of the challenge. And this way cities show and prove the other face, human, caring, more direct. And in my opinion, now we need to think of how to use this potential city branding. What can be realistically done better? So to sum up, what we need for a future is a stronger tie between branding and the goal of turning cities into happy places. Another thing is refocusing from external to internal, slightly imposed by the pandemic, yet to some extent welcome and beneficial. When borders were closed physically and to some extent mentally too, we developed more interest in the world close around us. It would have seemed that cities had no choice but to focus on the internal groups. However, we also need to admit that the situation has many benefits, appreciating the inhabitants and domestic tourists and individuals who in turn have started to appreciate the local values and learn about places which they consider less interesting or uninteresting. We should look at it as an investment in the future, a natural potential for ambassadors of a city brand. And this in turn is related to the last issue I would like to mention, namely the fact that cities should focus now on values, experience, and relations rather than volume. Value should go before volume. This opinion has been expressed more and more frequently, and the entire situation should confirm our belief that forging long-term bonds, attachment, sense of belonging, delivering the relevant values, and shaping individual experiences should become the core activity of city branding in the near future.
Thank you very much, Magdalena, for your contribution. Now it's time for Robert. Robert Govers is an independent consultant, scholar, speaker, and international author of On the Reputation of Cities, Regions, and Countries. He's co-editor of the academic journal Place Branding and Public Diplomacy, and the author of several books, the last one being Imaginative Communities, admired cities, regions, and countries. Professor Govers is the president of the International Place Branding Association. So, Robert, it's time for your first statement in this panel discussion.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you, Joseph, for hosting this and guiding us through this webinar. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I think everybody in this panel also hopes to be in Barcelona in December, as we still try to forge ahead with Joseph in organizing our annual conference. But of course, nobody knows what's going to happen in the meantime. But that's not why we're here today. And I had prepared a statement, but as opposed to going back to that, I would like to go back to what things that have been said earlier today. And I think Greg, who did a great keynote this morning, said some very important things that I'd like to go back to and just reinforce. Because one thing that he said is that the brand should be the essence of what we seek to become as a city in the future, right? So this is very important, I think, this long-term perspective of how the brand informs what happens in a city. And therefore also brand should become an important agent of change. This is also literally quoting here what he said. And he ended up with 7 points, I think it was, of what a brand can do or should do. And the first point was, of course, about promotion and selling the city. And as Mihalis has already said, maybe, and Greg, of course, also said, that in the past, we've put far too much emphasis on this idea of promotion and selling of the city. But brand is also about community building. He said it's also about positioning. It's about creating a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and having that DNA of the city or identity, whatever you want to call it, inform the positioning of a place. And I think we have given not enough attention to those aspects of quote unquote brand. And I'd like to talk about what I call imaginative communities, and that's why I called my book Imaginative Communities, because for me, brand is much more about community building, sense of belonging, sense of comradeship, neighborliness, as Greg called it, and then having that inform a sense of purpose, and therefore a sense of or creating a positioning, strategizing around positioning of a community, and therefore doing imaginative stuff, imaginative initiatives, having the brand inform the things that you do in a city in a way that is different from other cities. That's why I raised the question of events being tools, not just being tools for branding, but branding informing the events and how you do an event differently as other cities. And to finish off on that, he also said that city branders, the people involved in city brand, the consultants and the practitioners, should be thinking about a global alliance, focusing much less on selling the city and promoting it and just speaking louder than other cities, but actually as a tool to position yourself differently from other cities. And this is how branding could really contribute actually to lifting places out of this rat race of globalization and competition, and actually being able to collaborate more into raising the profile of cities generally. Because if you do branding well, you stand out and you have a different profile than other cities, and therefore, you don't necessarily compete, as you could argue major cities do. Like if you say Amsterdam, London, New York, Paris, they don't really compete with each other because they have really very different profiles. They are on everybody's bucket list. And the things that they offer and the profile that they have, by definition, makes them less competitive, but more like a blue ocean strategy and position that they create for themselves.
Thank you very much, Robert, for your initial words. And talking about brands, a brand could be conceived mainly as a communication tool, could be conceived as a way to convey effectively a message to a wide audience. So how can branding help cities to become more useful and relevant in this present situation? How would you like to ask this to answer these questions?
Thank you, Jose. I think this is a very interesting question, and also it's very difficult to answer. As you know, city branding is a tool for communicating, especially the uniqueness of a place. unique attractiveness of a place. As Robert just said, mostly people are attracted by the visible stuff, by the visible, tangible, physical situation, environment. So people cannot see much of the soft part, the heart, the emotional touching part extending out from a place. So my view is that taking Chinese city Wuhan as an example, right? Wuhan was a big city in China. It has 11 million people. Before the virus, it was a very, very well recognized city in China, and it wanted to be global. And it invites a lot of consultants to help them to promote the city globally. But after the virus, Wuhan was the first city to be locked down in the world, in China and in the world. So such a huge population. Of course, the city was suffering a lot. The citizen, everyone, including the government. So the government couldn't take control of this immediately. And the central government and the whole country send forces to help them. So in taking the city as one example, say how branding can help them at this time. We had some discussion in China a few weeks ago about Wuhan, about a city in the crisis time. So we think there are a few ways to promote the city for their soft parts, like values. Magda's mentioned the values, sense of belonging, and I will use this word as a citizen spirit. So Wuhan was the first city to be locked down, and everyone staying in Wuhan, stay at home. So they sacrificed their freedom, sacrificed their free movement outside of their house for a long time in order to protect other people. Of course, this is a very traditional Chinese value because we think the country is bigger than ourselves. That's our traditional value. So I think for Wuhan, in future, Wuhan spirit is seen by so many people. So in our social media, many people call Wuhan the city of hero, just like a heroic city. So I think heroic spirit of Wuhan will be a good point for attractiveness in future. And people will be more and more attracted by the citizen spirit, by the unique cultural attractiveness in this area. Apart from that, I think in the pandemic crisis is huge. I think connective efforts from everybody, every layers of the society come together can help. Otherwise, only one cannot. So in future, a community sense will be better. The larger one as a country, the smaller one as a neighborhood will be very, very strong to prevent the virus from a very negative side. And at the same time, in the Wuhan case, I think the government efficiency and the government effectiveness in dealing with crisis can also help the city become a more popular city in this way. So because the city is organized in a better way and the government work hard for people, etc. So also humanity stories, humanity true stories will attract the people. So in order to end this, because I don't have much time to extend, I think branding is still a tool for the cities in this time. It's very much up to the city what you have. What you have can touch people's heart, can promote the good values of the society and make people respect you, and everything will be paid back in near future. So Jose, I think that's my sharing for this very hard question. I think it's very hard for me to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting reflections on the example and the case of Wuhan. It's a good example of how to turn a challenge into an opportunity. And I would like you to share this question also with Michalis. Do you have any thoughts about how can branding can help cities in this present situation?
Yes, thank you very much, Jose. I think, well, Hong covered the topic very, very nicely. If I can just perhaps complement her answer with a bit more general ideas about the role of branding in this situation. I think it goes back to what I mentioned in the beginning, and it is one of the main messages I'd like to put across today, is about the relationship between branding and communication and the nature of communication. So yes, as you say in your question, branding is about communicating messages to a wide audience. But I think this situation has forced us to rethink a bit both the audience and the message. And I think, in my view at least, the message is becoming slightly better nowadays. It's like most places are focusing their communication on the message of, look how hard we try to be here for you, look what we are doing to support you in these challenging circumstances, all the efforts we do and everything. And I think that this is really the best thing that city branding can help cities do at the moment, is reinforce a sense of community. It does go back to a sense of belonging and a sense of community, localness in a way. So I think the message shifts from look, we are the best, to look, we are doing our best, rather, you know. And that is how place branding can help. For example, there is a long discussion around all these issues before the crisis, and hopefully there will be an even longer one after the crisis. I think, you know, there are suggestions, and I know a lot of cases where there are sort of local advisory groups for the place branding effort that have this task to sort of represent and reflect the feelings of the community, and in a way do what I was saying earlier, to bring the place brand closer to the people. So groups that help understand what the feeling of the community is, that identify and reward in many ways local small things that happen in a locality, whatever its size. And well, you know, most people will understand what I mean, and we find on brand, right? So we think they reinforce the brand, and therefore we want to put them on the spotlight a bit and show what is happening. So that is just an example. So, and I think that this is engaging in a more, you know, we are trying to be here for you as a city. That's where city branding can help. And this will also not only sort of help people face the current challenge, but as Magdalena said, like, it would provide more value. It would help branding provide more value to people and people's lives. And that's how it will help cities build more trust, you know, for the future and in the future, in our common future. But, you know, that is, for example, just the last thing I say, just for example, is we all talk about this new normality, yeah? So we all want a new and better normal. But I personally think that city branding is, and again, as Robert quoted Greg Clark for saying, you know, if branding is about finding the essence of what we want to be in the future, then it is really city branding's job right now to find what is this new normality that we want to look for, that we want to build. What does it mean for people, and who will get to decide, you know, who will create this new normality? So these are, I think, city branding is more relevant than ever in today's circumstances. But as long as we understand that it is about people's lives, it is about communities, right? So I think that's what I would like to add to Hong's answer.
Thank you very much, Michal. It's very insightful. But we are talking about communities. We are talking about citizens and residents. A very good point, this one, that it's about cities doing their best. But also tourism is a very important component of the reputation and image of the cities. So I think that it is a very good communication tool, tourism communication. Do you anticipate any lasting and long-term changes in tourist behavior? Because these changes could affect the reputation and image of the cities. Or in your opinion, we will get back to business as usual as soon as the coronavirus is controlled? Robert, do you want to answer this question? Robert, are you there?
I just needed to unmute myself. Thank you very much for that question, and I think it's a very relevant one, obviously, because many of us see now that, well, we have been seeing before the coronavirus crisis that change was needed in many places, and what I found really encouraging about the coronavirus crisis is that change can apparently happen from one day to the next. So it is possible. I think that has really been striking me very much, and I have seen changes enthusiastically, just realizing the fact that it can easily be done. We've heard the example of Tel Aviv, where suddenly food and beverage providers can expand their terraces in the street. They can open up. We can close down traffic lanes for cyclists and pedestrians. So all of these things are possible as long as we see the urgency. Now, the thing about tourism is, I think for far too long, governments have seen it as an ancillary thing. It's not core business for many governments. Tourism is just, it's nice for economy, and it brings in foreign currency. So that's good, and therefore we need to promote it, period. And whenever something goes wrong, it's the tourists' fault because they don't behave. We think that and therefore your question is, will tourist behavior change? I don't think tourist behavior will change, and it doesn't have to change. What needs to change is that we manage it, as opposed to just selling the city and keeping pushing for more. I think what governments need to do is now seriously look at what is the tourism economy and the visitor economy. How is that part of the strategy of the city? What is our brand? So who are we? What do we want to become in the future? And therefore, how does that inform the various activities that we're in? How does the tourism economy, visitor economy compete maybe with investment economy or with with other economic activities? And do we want that? And to what extent? And what kind of tourism do we want? And what kind of tourism in this city fits the brand that we want to be and are and want to be in the future? So these are the types of questions I think that places need to start answering, and then start managing tourism. Because I firmly believe that if we do nothing, it will be back to business as usual. Because you cannot blame the tourist for, what is tourism? What is a tourist? It's somebody who wants to see other places, other cultures, have nice food and meet people. That's not going to change. I'm a firm believer that, even though we now have an online conference, we will go back to conferences because we want to meet other people. We want to hug other people. We want to, what do they call it now? Skin urgency. Now, skin, the need to have to touch skin with other people, which we can't now. So all of that is human nature. It's going to come back. And therefore, tourists will not change. But the way we allow them to impact the city and what kind of things we do want and not want, I think that's a choice to be made by policymakers and, of course, stakeholders in the industry. But the way that's tourism has been happening in the past, which is, of course, being economies of scale. The more people on a flight, the better. The cheaper the cost, the better. The more people on a hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So those models need to change, and therefore it's about managing the industry. Sorry, too long an answer.
Thank you very much, Robert. Do you want to answer the same question, Magdalena? What's your take about this, that if there will be any changes in tourist behavior in the future?
Okay, so I will take the question to the more individual level. Traveling has become one of the major human needs. I think that all in all, the situation as we know it will not change it, because human memory is short and we tend to go back quickly to old habits, especially if they are associated with pleasure. However, the virus might result in tourism traveling less frequently, depending also on the scale of the economic crisis. What is more, people may start to travel in a more responsible way. Perhaps the crisis will make people aware that not every flight needs to be taken, that nearby places can also be interesting. But as for now, as a result of the pandemic, people feel safer when they are closer to home or in the places which are not that crowded. So I assume that the structure of the destination is bound to change probably. We will certainly travel more safely in a more informed and more careful way. For sure, we will pay more attention to prevention and hygiene when traveling and, to observing the basic rules. Travelers may also feel safer in hotels rather than in B&Bs, I guess. So I assume in the nearest future, this behavior will definitely change, but quickly and frequently, especially that the scale of the pandemic varies from one country to another. Therefore, the most important thing is regular understanding of what tourists want and what affects their decision. Personally, I hope that we will travel in a much more responsible and ethical way now. And of course, that the joy of traveling will come back.
Hopefully so. So now my new question will be for Hong Fang, for Professor Fang. It's about communication. Talking about communication, maybe in the last weeks we have seen a change in the environment, and online communication is gaining importance. Do you think that digital channels will be more important than ever for cities?
Yes, thank you for the question, Jose. I agree with you. I think online communication is very important, more important than ever before, especially social media channels like internationally, Facebook, Twitter. In Chinese setting, we have Weibo, we have WeChat, and the young people like the video one we call Douyin. Douyin, that's a TikTok in outside China. So I think dealing with a crisis, normally the task is taken by the government. So many governments, they are not good at using digital media at the time of crisis to letting people know what happens. And sometimes the time is delayed because of the media. So I think there is a learning need for government officials by using digital media, social media, and the newest media in their country to communicate with people, not only daily, but especially at the time of the such crisis. So in our case, I think China is very developed in the application of digital technology. So people use digital technology, mobile phone, applications on mobile phone, pay, everything. So we use it daily. So this time the communication about the pandemic come and goes through our mobile phones. I think that over the past few years, the Chinese government, the central, local, they are required to learn the digital media in order to get their messages across to the general public. So this time, I think they are very quick. They developed a few applications for public health. So everyone needs to install those applications on our phone. So we use that to get information about where the cases are and ups and downs of the cases and where not to go. You go some spots, you need to scan. The reason is this is a temporary use, not forever, but this time, because you get a record, and then when some cases happen, you can be traced immediately by scanning that. This was found very, very effective. Another thing is the government use, I think they use the integrated approach of media. They use mainstream, our very traditional old media, political media. They use whatever, young media, Bilibili, very, very modern for young people. They use everything to let the information go to people. And for the news conference, they have daily news conference for cities and the government. So they break the news conference into very, very small parts and put them into our social media. And so if you put your fingers on your mobile phone for information, every day you get a lot of information about what they are doing. So I think this time they are doing quite well in using social media build trust, I think. So I haven't done any research, but just as my own very personal experience, I think using social media, very up-to-date media is a task for dealing with crisis, for letting people know, keeping the information transparency. And of course, the public use social media as well to supervise the government, to supervise, to inspect on something not done very well at that moment. So I think it's very useful, and it helps in future for city branding, and it must be a very important tool for city branding as well. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, indeed, social media, but especially mobile applications, have proven very, very useful in times of crisis and risk management with the population. Is anyone wanting to add something to the discussion? Robert, you, for example?
Briefly, maybe. I would agree that obviously, it's extremely important for crisis communication. But what I find most interesting when we talk about brand, what Mihalis was saying earlier, what is the nature of this communication? What communication are we talking about? And in the discussions that we've had today, and also in the discussions that we've been having online in various various platforms about the role of communication, and particularly social media and online communication for city branding, there's too much focus on it being just another channel for broadcasting, for sending out messages. And I think and this is of course relevant when you were talking about crisis communication and you want to get messages across. But from a brand perspective, what I found most interesting is this idea of community building. And what you saw happening in the early days of the lockdown, the creative ways in which people were posting stuff online to stay in touch with their neighbors, with their community, with others in the city, how they, just messages about solidarity and offering help. And the most wonderful example, I think, was the Italians spontaneously going to the balconies and starting singing Italian songs. Since then, of course, all governments have now promoted this idea of going out and clapping for the healthcare workers at 8 o'clock in the evening. At least that's what they try to make us do in Belgium, but it doesn't work, right? And that's the way, the classic way of looking at city branding and city brands as trying to force things down people's throats, either internally or externally. But the real value, if you have a strong brand, is that people start to spontaneously reflect their sense of identity, their sense of belonging, and this is what was so wonderful in Italy, and of course, which doesn't happen in many other places because there is not this sense of Italian strength, and therefore also it links back to this assumption that there is a crisis, so we have a reputation issue. I don't know whether that is the case. Is that true? Everybody has the same crisis. So is everybody therefore in a reputational crisis? I really don't know. And I would argue that maybe, I don't know, I don't have the figures. I haven't studied it yet. I hope it's going to be reflected in the Nation Brands Index, for instance. But maybe Italy came out stronger than it was before, because actually there were some very powerful messages coming out of Italy in terms of its national character, the character of the people, the resilience, their ability as a community to fight this pandemic, solidarity, etc. And this is, I think, what brands really is about. branding is really about.
Thank you very much, Robert. I want to go back to this community think about places, about the sense of community and working together. And I would like to ask Michalis if he perceives any shift in city branding from what we could call external communication addressed to tourists and investors to internal communication addressed to residents and citizens.
Yes, I do. That's the simple answer, and the proof is in this webinar, in the discussions we are having today. You know, starting with the keynote of Greg Clark in the morning, who made this point quite clearly, I thought, and I was very happy about that. And then he talked about city branding being able to create a sense of identity and unite the city with increased common purpose. Again, like Robert did earlier, I'm quoting from his slide. I think it's the same slide that Robert was mentioning earlier, what city branding can do for cities. And I totally agree with that. And I think that is precisely what we see. It's a shift from external communication more towards internal audiences. Now, we have been obviously, you know, discussing that in academic terms for some time now, but we have never been obviously convincing enough to you know, penetrate practice. But now I think that this is becoming the case, and there's a lot of tools that people use, social media being one of them, as people were saying earlier. I think a good example that I would like to mention here is this the idea that I see becoming more popular, the idea of the collaborative vision of developing a collective vision and finding ways to develop a vision for our brand and for our place that is, as Robert was saying earlier, not coming from what was it, forced in people's throats or something like that. So it is much more common, much more developed with stakeholders. And I believe in such collaborative efforts and collaborative vision. I think it is a great tool to guide their strategy and to give a sense of purpose for the whole effort. It is a great tool to give not only a sense of purpose, but a common source of purpose. That's extremely important. But it also has a practical, you know, function that it can be used for it can be shared easily, even with external audiences. So it makes the full circle, you know. So it is we can use such a collaborative vision to promote, really, to go back and have something more meaningful to promote about our place and about our brand. So it is not only a common sense of purpose, but, well, it's the wrong word, but a shareable sense of purpose, you know. So I think that this is what we see. And yes, there is more attention to residents, and I'm happy about that, because it simply makes the brand more sustainable. It makes it more sustainable because it gives ownership of the brand to the people who matter most. And for me, these people are the residents and local stakeholders. So yeah, that would be my thoughts on that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michalis. Professor Fan, can you provide any example of cities using this kind of strategies to engage with their citizens in these times?
Thank you, Jose. I think there are many cases in the world now. First of all, getting your citizens or residents done something like keeping social distancing or wearing masks can be the very basic policy in everywhere now in the world. I just want to share with you one or two examples in China, like how Chinese government I think automatically adopt kind of we call connective system, cultural value to help people engaged in what in giving a good, better solution to the crisis. In our country, I think when government give any policy, any strategy, they always think people can take part in that, because what we treat our government is very much like a parent and children. So the government is a parent, and we even have a word called, if you are a government official, we have a very idiomatic word, is called, you are parental official. Just, you are just our parent. So when parent is doing something, they always want to get children involved, kind of like that. So when we have blocked down everywhere, every resident in the neighborhood is encouraged to take turns to be the guard of your residence. And for us, we don't say no, because we are children. We think we should support them. We should be part of it. And we voluntarily take turns to be engage ourselves in the whole policy. We have so many policies like this. For example, when we have lockdown, every family only have one person can go out once, one day. Go out for your grocery shopping. Sometimes you can't go out when the virus in your area was severe, was bad, so no one can go out. Then the community of it got very lower ladder leaders, very low officials. They will organize voluntary groups of citizens or residents to help others to buy things. You just send them a message and tell people what you want, and people will get that to you. So I think in our way, we have individual engagement, and also we have a smaller group, collective group engagement. And we have bigger ones, like the policy to send doctors from every provincial hospital in the country to Wuhan to engage voluntary doctor and nurses. So we have many. I think without engaging citizens, without engaging social groups, I don't think it's easy to deal with such big crisis. So those are there are many examples. But I totally support this. I think through this, everyone takes a role in helping each other to overcome such big difficulty. So I just applaud for that. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Professor Fan. I would like to ask just a final question for all the panelists or all the colleagues here, and then we will take some questions from the audience. All right. So my last question will be this one. This panel is about research, is about academy too. So my question will be, what research topics can emerge in city branding in this new and challenging situation? Do you have any idea of new research topics that can emerge and that can be interesting for the field? Anyone?
Okay, I can start with. I think researchers responded very quickly with COVID-19 related research, so surveys and reports. I checked yesterday, there are 66,000 research items on the pandemic on the ResearchGate platform, which is very popular among academics. And I think, of course, the impact of the pandemic on various sectors is key to analyzing and restarting city life. Specifically, I assume that the social and psychological aspect of such a research change in tourism and residents' behavior will be of paramount importance here. And what is more, we hopefully see the pandemic as a reason to act more sustainably, and therefore sustainable development should be another topic to take a closer look at again, because it's not new, yes, but probably we have to look at it again.
Anyone else?
Robert? I would, may I?
Yeah.
I would, thank you. I would agree with that completely. And I think you could even raise it a little bit higher and say place branding, because there's also a question on the in the chat room about how place branding contributes to the new normality. Let's hope that we are all going to think about a new normality. And I think, as has been said by many of the commentators so far already, that place branding is crucial because place branding is about, again, asking yourself, who are we, where do we want to go, and how do we therefore want to position ourselves? So it's about making choices. And I think, and I really hope that this will then also become the new research topic, because as Mihalis has said, there's quite a bit of misalignment between the practice of place branding and the academia. And I think in academia, things have been advancing more than they have been in practice. And I'm generalizing here, obviously, because there's quite a few great cases that we don't have time to go into today that have looked at place branding as a strategic tool and have really looked at who are we as a community and how can we therefore position ourselves as such. But I think we all need to start doing that. And this should be also the new, objective for research, not just the communication side, whatever type of communication it might be, but also how does place branding inform choices? How does it inform policy choices? And therefore it also inform actions. How can we do things in a way that it is on quote unquote on brand, that it reinforces our positioning, and therefore also more in a longer term, not just environmentally sustainable, but also socially sustainable, and with a strategic objective. How can branding inform the future for cities?
Anyone else, Michalis?
Can I? Yes, thank you very much. I know, I am absolutely sure that Robert meant that we academics also learn from practice, obviously, and I know Robert believes that very strongly, and I know that there's many good examples in practice, right? So, but I do think that there is a responsibility for us academics to just go into a bit more difficult things without having the pressure of implementing things. That is our benefit, and we shouldn't see that as a problem. That is what we can do best, and there's a great usefulness in that. So, and I think, in my view, there is only one thing, well, not only, the first thing we need to clarify is something that we should have clarified probably much earlier, is that I have the following question in my mind, is what do people do with a place brand? How do people use a place brand? I mean, I do know how I use it because, I publish papers and I keep my job, and I know politicians use it to be re-elected, to do a good job, to offer to their community. And I know how a lot of people use the place brand, but I do not know how citizens, how residents use the place brand. I haven't understood personally the usefulness of a place brand, for example, in a situation like the COVID crisis. Is it the case then that a good place brand has helped people in some places face the crisis easier and better and more effectively? I really don't think so. And I think that there's a lot to be understood here and researched. What do people do with this thing that we call the place brand? If we don't understand how they relate to that, we cannot help them relate more to their place, which is the main aim. So that's the only thing I would like to add on what has already been said as research topics. I think there's a fundamental question to be asked. What do people do with this brand? That's what I would like to add.
Okay, Hong, do you want to add something to the discussion? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I agree with three of you, and I think there are a lot to be researched on. I'm thinking about whether we can do research on what a healthy place is, because we don't have much literature in health, public health, and place brand. I think this can be a very strong brand in future if the public health issues can be solved or can be prevented. So that's number one. Number two is, in my sense, in our sense, is kind of place, the citizen in a place, their solidarity can be a value for place branding, because this cannot be visible for tourists. So, I think this is very important. And lastly, I want to see is a place with a spirit, or a place with a social norm, which is respected globally, is respected globally, a place with a social norm, with social norms. I don't know what, but I think very interesting to look on that. So those are I think there are so much to look at in future. Thank you, host.
Thank you very much. So now it's time for questions from the audience. I have a very first question, but I have these questions with already an answer from the audience. And the question is, what do you think that Brazil and USA can do right now to improve their image? And the answer we already have is new elections. So do you want to comment on this about the image and reputation in hard times of USA and Brazil right now?
I think the fundamental problem is that it lays bare it lays bare some of the issues in those societies. So it's not a coronavirus crisis happening. Obviously, it's a coronavirus crisis happening in the USA. Don't get me wrong, and it's terrible, and it's devastating what's happening there. But from a brand perspective, from a reputational perspective, it's not COVID-19 that is the problem. It only has accelerated the problem. We have seen the reputation of the USA declining in the Nation Brands Index since 2012. So it's a leadership issue, clearly, and this is what really damages, from a reputational perspective, the image of the USA, and the same in Brazil. Of course, COVID-19 has dramatically accelerated that effect, because now we see things. The world is constantly seeing things unraveling, and it's heartbreaking, to be honest. The one thing I was thinking about the USA that might be an interesting research topic also is that you could argue, being the land of the free, it actually makes sense to not organize anything and just let things unravel the way they do, because it's the land of the free, so everybody can do whatever they want. So you can't do a lockdown. It's not very un-American to do a lockdown. It's very un-American to tell people that they have to stay at home. So I'm being obviously sarcastic here, but you could argue that maybe what they're doing is quote unquote on brand, the land of the free. But that is of course being very cynical.
Just a bit, I would say. Anyone else want to add anything to the discussion? Michalis, do you want to say something about Brazil, USA?
No, I mean, but I'm glad Robert answered that question, but he's the expert on nations and good nations and bad nations and everything, so that's good. I think I forgive my persistence, but I do see it as the problem of not bringing the place brand and close to people. It's like leaving the place brand at a level that is much higher for planning, for looking at it in different ways that do not necessarily relate to people's experience in the street, in their lives. Now, I don't want to say that obviously I would have done anything better, right? It's a terribly difficult situation to deal with for any politician, for anybody. So I'm not here to pretend to be wiser than anyone else, but my answer to all these things is bring the policy, bring the brand, in this case, closer to the people. That would be my instinctive reply.
Anyone else? No? We have another question, Michal, is quite related to this you were talking about. It's about the relationship between place branding and social innovation. Could be seen place branding as a tool for social innovation in cities?
Well, I don't know. I will attempt the first answer. I'm sure other panelists will be more able to answer more clearly. Again, instinctively, I would say it's the other way around, perhaps. Social innovation can be the basis of a nice branding sort of campaign in this case, or even strategy, if there is such a basis in reality. So the one thing is that we have to see branding not as sort of replacing other policies or other initiatives and other concepts and ideas like social innovation, but on the contrary, branding is something that can integrate these other policies and these other things that are happening in the city and take advantage. So, you know, put them all together to sort of to go back, improve the reputation of the place. So there's a close relationship, but I don't know which should come first, or you know what I mean. But I'm sure others will be able to add.
Robert, Hong, Magdalena, do you want to add something here? Magdalena, go ahead.
I think it's a very important question, and I would even treat it a little bit broader. I would say it has to, that's for sure. And the first thing that came to my mind is, for example, the environmental justice. This is, for example, an equal access to the natural environment, which was not enjoyed by everyone during the lockdown. And I think we should take it into account more maybe in the urban context, but I'm pretty sure that our cities needs to be a little bit rearranged in order to, at the beginning, probably to disperse people to some extent, when they work, do shopping, relax in the green areas. So I suppose that the social distancing is a criterion of organizing the urban space and will remain in the back of people's mind for a long time. And probably we will need to use the social innovation to create places like that. And then, of course, as a result, now we should use them as a base for place branding as well. It's a little bit complicated because there are many relations, of course, but I think the human being is in the center definitely at the moment. So we have to follow that.
Any final reflection from Robert and Professor Fan? No? Hong? Go ahead.
I think this is a two-way interactive questions. Brand can help social innovation, and the social innovation can consolidate brand. There are some cities in China. For example, China is a country, we like to use the word harmonious society. So if we use a harmonious society, that means the whole social structure, whatever, should be improved to achieve the harmony as an ultimate goal of the society. So that's for a similar example like Magda mentioned just now, so City of Justice. Another thing is another city, my hometown, wants to build itself like a garden city. So the garden city from urban planning, from the clusters of the smaller area around the center. So they change a lot, not very small, very big changes, but that's physical, okay? So I think, yeah, very good question. It's good to think about. That's it, thank you.
So thank you everyone for this wonderful and nice conversation.